Welcome to CGT Square Talk, where top experts in the industry share their groundbreaking journeys. Brought to you by Blue Squared, your strategic digital partner.
All right, welcome guys to another edition of CGT Square Talk. It's been a little while since we did our last episode, but we are excited to get going again. And today we're going to talk about AI. We have a special guest, Kenneth Gibbons from Sternbridge Technical Consulting. And of course, we got our usual co-host, Armin, who's been playing a lot with, what have you been playing with, Armin?
Clawbot.
OpenClaw. OpenClaw, yeah. So, Kenny, I know you've done a lot of work in AI, and I know you're excited to talk a little bit about Armin and what we've been doing. From a strategic perspective, actually, we see this as a bit of a, I don't want to say competitive advantage, but it's really something that we want to get into, and we're doing now with our software development lifecycle process, AI augmented software lifecycle. So Armin will talk a little bit about that, and I know Kenny, you've got some questions for our man Armin. So I'll turn it over to you for right now, and then I'll jump in where necessary.
Yeah, and I'll do a quick introduction. So hi everyone, Kenny Gibbons, as Anthony mentioned, part of Sternbridge Technology Consulting, and Anthony.
What did I say?
Technical, but it's
technical technology.
But I spent about over a decade now in the life sciences industry, kind of helping executives with their digital transformation strategies, the whole way down to supporting software implementations on the manufacturing floor. So spent all of my career in this space. That's how I know Anthony and Armin, working with them in the cell and gene therapy space. So I'm happy to be a part of this, happy to have this conversation and to talk about a lot of the industry buzz, which is what's kind of happened with Clawbot. People have called it kind of the deep seek moment of agentic AI. So really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, right. Very, very interesting topics, and let's dive right into it.
Cool. So Kenny, before you get started, what I can say is this, is that our Armin, this guy watched some YouTube videos. He got so excited about it. He literally spent like 24/7 for like 2 weeks deep diving into this. We weren't sure we were going to be able actually to pull him back out of it, but he's done some really cool things. So I'll let you go. Go ahead.
I'm back from the dark side. Yes, I'm back.
Exactly.
And Armin, maybe before we get into what is the Clawbot, maybe you give a quick background on yourself so that people can understand, because I know you've done a lot of this work and you're fairly technical and are technical. So maybe it would help to just understand as we talk through it, kind of what your skills were to start on this journey before you started into the Clawbot.
Absolutely. So again, allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Armin, and he didn't like that. Okay, my name is Armin, and I have been with Blue Square for a little bit over 3 years now. Time flies. My background started long time ago, or my journey started long time ago in the technology world. I've been in Silicon Valley for a while. I've done everything from building data centers, being a system admin for the Windows systems and servers, to building software, doing a lot of testing, and then kind of migrated to validation world and working with CSV systems within the pharmaceutical industry and bringing systems to live in the CSV environment. So kind of like a full circle from all the way from the back-end systems all the way to software development and front-end systems, and then validating and pushing them live. That's kind of my background, and it is, I do have a technical knowledge. I haven't touched a lot of things in a very long time until 4 weeks ago when I started on this journey and went into the dark side of the moon and kind of kind of locked myself into it, and now I'm out, and we can talk about this. So
cool. Well, great, Armin, and you'll see as we talk through this where Armin's experience across the entire software development lifecycle plays, because as he thought about the Clawbot use cases, having that broad experience helps bring together an end-to-end process through the Clawbot. So before we jump into exactly what Armin's built, I thought we would start with just an introduction. Clawbot's been around now for a couple months, maybe two months, kind of made a big splash onto the scene when it happened. I mentioned before, it kind of shook the AI space, similar to what DeepSeek did with their lower cost inferencing style that they did with their models. So what is OpenClaw? I thought we'd start there. It is an open source software. It was actually called Clawbot and then kind of Moltbot. Now it's really considered OpenClaw as it kind of came out, and they had some fights with Anthropic in that space. And really the game changer here is, as an open source software, anyone can kind of download it and use it. And you can think of it as an orchestrator. So it's an AI orchestrator that can take inputs in, data, whether that be through the web or through content that you might have, on your personal, or let's call it enterprise machines. And it can use that to then orchestrate processes with AI. And we'll show how that's kind of done with Armin's use case. One of the things that it really opened up everything is with persistent memory. So now as this system does things that you automate or you use across the models, it also creates and make sure that all of that memory is there, right? So it can kind of openly adapt and use that. If you've used chatbots in the past, think of GPT, it doesn't always, it's getting better, but it's that persistent memory isn't there. There's context window lengths, those kind of things that aren't always advantageous to kind of doing this automation style work that OpenClaw helps to produce. I think the other
Kenny,
thing
you said something actually
Yeah.
interesting, and I know you're going to touch on this, but you said anybody can basically go and download it, which creates, I know you're going to talk a little bit about security and how to wall this stuff off, but it becomes, it is an issue. Go ahead.
Yes. And I'll add one thing and I'll let Armin add. I was actually talking to some of my clients in the security space, and when it first got introduced, I would say everyone was very scared because of the factor that anyone can bring it in, can download it into whatever network, whatever hardware is there.
Yeah.
And then it kind of opens up the world depending on how autonomous you make this and what kind of access you give it. So then in the AI space, things like prompt injection, those kind of things can start to occur. And Armin, I don't know if you have anything to add as you went through this journey. I know you made a lot of security considerations in your approach to leveraging this software.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things that when I first watched the video, probably about a month ago, 4 weeks ago, on YouTube, talking about the OpenClaw, one of the first things that came into my mind is specifically that, how secure it is, right? And what can one do to make sure that it doesn't, when you unleash it, that it doesn't go just and performs tasks on its own. You need to kind of have guardrails in place and so forth. And that was kind of the first step to figure out, how do I want to install it? Where do I want to install it? What type of access do I want it to give? And then take it step by step as opposed to just diving in. Obviously, initially, I was so excited that I wanted to do everything. But then I had to kind of pull myself back and say, you know what, one step at a time. Why don't we try this and then try something else and then see how it performs with different tasks and so forth. So,
right, and always
one
in
of
the
the
back
terms,
of your mind.
okay,
Sorry, Kenny, but in the back of your mind, I mean, we shouldn't forget we deal in the pharma space, right? So I think any business has to worry about, what you're talking about in terms of security and being careful, but definitely in these highly regulated environments. I know that's always in the back of your mind.
Yeah, and the thing I was going to add too is the terminology that I've heard as I look into using it and figuring out what's the best secure mechanism is the blast radius. So, how big is the blast radius if something bad happens? How far can this be extended because of the permissions and different use cases that you've given it access to, basically? I kind of like the blast radius term, probably not the most corporate and enterprise level term, but that I think is a good way to think about it. So
as of right now, if I may say, our blast radius is very, very limited, and it's on purpose.
And it's considering that when you start, right, is as every use case, everything that you put into it's instead of can I do this, it's yes, I can do this, but what happens if something wrong happens. So it's kind of keeping that in the back of your mind throughout the entire process, which I think when anyone can go and download, that's the big risk. Is no one, if you don't understand the mechanisms and what it has access to, you don't know how big that blast radius is going to be.
Exactly.
So
it's not just that you can download it, right? It's also what it can do if you're not careful.
Yes, yep. The root access, those kind of things.
Yes, absolutely.
And before we jump into the use case, I know we're doing a long introduction here, but just wanted to add a couple other concepts, some things that you may hear as we talk through it. This is what I would consider an agentic AI use case. It's agentic AI at this point is an industry buzzword, but what we're going to see and what we'll talk through, I think, is a true applicable use case of the agentic AI framework. This is just one example implementation of it. A couple things to consider, and we'll talk through, are things like Armin already mentioned, guardrails. How do you protect against things in the AI space like hallucinations or other things that might go awry when autonomy and agents have the ability to, let's say, send emails? So how do you stop it from just going crazy and sending 1,000 emails? Another thing that we'll talk about is the supervisory agent approach in kind of these agentic AI frameworks. Armin kind of built a little one in that piece. And then, again, can't talk about AI without LLMs and large language models and how that's integrated into this approach. So just wanted to also kind of give that background. To me, any even enterprise implementation is similar to what we're going to talk through. It might be bigger, it might be, it might have more governance or security involved, but all the concepts are still here and the same as we talk through this.
I think also, Kenny, there's something to keep in mind here. So we have an advantage because we are, and purposely so, a smaller organization, right? We keep it that way. We do have to deal with regulation. We do have to validate our software. Armin, when he did this, and he'll talk through it in a minute, he kept it very, so Armin is super excited, right? And he wants to have the agents do a lot. And our CTO is a little bit more, hey, you know what, this is great. It needs to be, some human oversight. And we're kind of landing in the middle on how that's going as we do our testing and playing with it and figuring out where it is actually appropriate in our life cycle, our software development life cycle. So basically what I'm saying is having those two sides, right? Where Armin is like, yeah, let's go let this thing do everything. And actually he's funny because he'll say that, and then at the same time he's like, I'm not gonna let this thing loose. I'm not giving it the keys to the castle. And then our CTO is like, well, hang on a second, we need to be. And I say that because, and the reason why I say it's good because we're smaller, because we can kind of balance that. I know large organizations are going to like put the brakes on a lot of this and maybe not get some of the benefits that you can get from it because of that. But that's totally understandable.
Great point, Anthony, and makes complete sense. And I think that yin and the yang approach has to be there, right? Because it's so easy to get excited. You see it. When Armin showed it to me for the first time last week, I thought, oh my God, this is so much further along. My mind was just spinning of kind of how powerful this can be. And then you got to bring in the reality of, yes, it can be powerful, but there's this, and this that you need to consider as part of that. So.
And there's certain aspects of the software development lifecycle that it's more appropriate to let it loose a little bit more than others. Anyway, we don't have, let's keep going.
So I think with that, Armin, I know Anthony and I have done a lot of the talking, and you've done a lot of the work. So I think
but that's how it always works.
Do you want to take us through, the process, maybe start with the use case that you went after, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Absolutely. So first thing first, I wanted to talk about the initial setup and what we had to do in order to make sure that we kind of contain everything and limit that blast radius, as you put it eloquently there, right? So there were multiple different choices how we could have gone after it. Installing it on a local machine that runs in my house, and then just using that as a means of communication and so forth. But that opens up a lot of different issues. It's obviously not as secure as having something in a data center and so forth. So after looking at multiple different variations of things, we decided that we're going to go with a virtual private server. We've installed it on the virtual private server. And then we locked it down further where we are completely removed all the root access, not allowing to access any root on the server, as well as make sure that only specific IP addresses can communicate to the server. So it's not really open to the entire internet. Nobody can actually spoof those addresses or come in and do anything harmful, right? So we pretty much locked it down that it's really, really contained within that server without giving any access to anything outside of it, right? So initially I was so excited. I'm like, oh, it's going to do my emails, it's going to do my calendaring, it's going to do all of these different things. And then I kind of scaled it down and after looking into it, right? So no, it does not have access to my emails, so it cannot send anything harmful to anybody to outside of our organization, and it's only working on specific things. Now,
well, didn't you kind of start by building a kind of like an assistant bot, right? That was kind of your first.
So yes, so once we figured out the environment situation and we decided that, hey, it's going to run on a VPS server. Then we brought out the server and all that technical stuff, and great, and we locked it down. Then the next big step was to figure out how we're going to communicate with it. OpenClaw, as everybody knows, has different means of communication. You can do it via WhatsApp, via Telegram, or any other applications. And we've tried them in the different combinations with Slack and so forth. And once again, through trial and error, we landed that the best way to communicate and the less issues and the less breaks and security from the security aspect is we communicate directly to the instance, right? So using its native communication channel, which is the OpenClaw dashboard that they provide once you install the application. And something to mention also, they're continuously updating the application, continuously, almost on the everyday basis. There's an update that is coming out, and the new updates introduce new features to the gateway as well. So now, once that was defined, the next step what we did is I wanted to build a mission control. And I think it's very important for anybody who's using this to have their own mission control. In what includes in a mission control is pretty much how you would structure your work with these agents. You can spin off as many agents as you want to. You can give them different skills, but how do you work with them? How do you assign tasks? And whether you want to just continuously chat back and forth with an agent, or you actually want to use a task assignment and the way that they can actually learn and hand off tasks from one to another. And that kind of fits within the process. So once we built the mission control and then started to play with additional agents and adding agents and teaching them and giving them skills. And you mentioned, Kenny, earlier, persistent memory. This is the very big key here. Once you have an agent running and you gave specific skills, you actually let that agent know to now keep it in their memory continuously. No matter if the server is rebooted, if we lose connectivity, anything happens, it keeps everything stored. The best part about it is, and it's a kind of top-down approach where you have your main agent, which I called mine Alfred. I'm a big Batman fan. So Alfred is a main agent, and it does everything that it has to do with a system. Anything system related, anything that has to do with overall setup of the system. This is Alfred's job. Alfred also supervises all the other agents. Now, when I ask Alfred to create me an agent that we call it a product owner and give it certain skills and make sure that those skills are saved, it actually created all these repositories and saved all the memories and so forth for the product owner. And then it can also push that down to other agents where the agents don't have to go and learn, when you can say, hey, take these set of skills and push it down to all the other agents. So it makes it easier.
So Armin, that's a great background. Wanted to add a couple things here as we go through too.
Before you do that, let me just, so he made it sound really easy, but I have to say, because I watched him do this and we talked about it quite a bit, it wasn't a one and done, like, oh, this is a great idea, let me go see how this works. This took actually a lot of technical kind of know-how. It took a lot of back and forth, a lot of experimenting, talking to our CTO, getting ideas. So it's not like, oh, wow, I can just kind of drop this in and I'm off to the races. Because it took him a lot of iterations and a lot of, trial.
You're absolutely right. And during that process, we had to rebuild our VPS server probably about 10 times from scratch. So like playing around, breaking things, making things work, breaking things, figuring out what's better and everything else. In that same process, we literally rebuild the server about 10 times.
Yeah, it's a good point. And maybe a couple other things I wanted to add to, more from the functional standpoint, less technical. I think everything I'm seeing in the industry now, right, what you were describing, Armin, is what was previously in cloud-based architecture, like a microservices-based architecture, but now coming with AI agents. So I'm seeing in the industry now, it's getting easier and easier to quote unquote spin up agents. Like you even mentioned, you can spin up, like, especially in Clawbot, I get the feeling it's very easy to just spin up an agent, but where the value is building the right architecture and functional use cases along that agent framework. So when I've been working with enterprises that want to build an agentic AI platform, and they've started in kind of the POC, very narrowed focus, it's an okay place to start, but you miss a lot of the value add with an agentic AI platform where you can kind of start building out those functional, let's call them vertical workflows, that this agent can talk to this agent. This agent has a very specific use case in the technology stack, right? So maybe one agent is trained and specifically made to go get data out of a specific database and share it with the right context back to whatever agent asks. So I think thinking about the architecture, the flows that you need to have, and the more narrow that you can kind of pick and choose for that agent to do a task, I think the less opportunity you have for things like hallucination, things like going off the rails and doing that. So just wanted to add that context into it too.
So Kenny, that's actually a really good point. But what I would say, so from my perspective, right, kind of having to deal with the oversight or the management of what we do at Blue Squared. This is kind of where the human intervention also comes in, right? So Armin did this great stuff, and I started to think, okay, how can we improve our life cycle, basically, right? But just letting the bot hand me, okay, this bot's going to do this, it's going to hand to this next bot, and then to the next bot, and to the next bot. I think like with any software development, when you're trying to solve a problem, what's the process, right? What is the process? What does your SDLC look like, or whatever process you're trying to improve with the agents? And then where does the human oversight, come in? So for us, like when we're developing software, the product owner, the product manager, right? So, I got a user story. Can I use a bot to help me enhance that or write my requirement? And then how do you build it using your current process? And then second, how can I improve my process? Because now I may not have to do it exactly like I used to do. So those are the things that we're looking at from let's say a strategic perspective and not so much a technical perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to you guys' point, initially I was so excited about it. Like I said, I wanted to do everything, right? But then we kind of had to focus and narrow it down, because we are a software, we are a service provider, but we also a software development shop, and we develop our own software. And then as we were focusing into it, we figured it out that this was the lowest hanging fruit for us, and the best output that it could give us is taking our existing SDLC process and then looking at it as we're performing it now with humans, and then see how we can create an AI augmented SDLC process where we can pick and choose specific tasks within the process that could be replaced by the agent as opposed to be performed by a human. At the same time, keeping a human in the loop for the important part, right? Where the guardrails come in.
Well, plus for regulation, validation, all that stuff, we're not just going to all of a sudden, flip a switch and all automated. So that didn't work. So
maybe let's talk about that process. I'll give a quick introduction, and then Armin, you obviously know your process kind of actually, after automating it, probably better than anyone. So if we talk about the SDLC process in general, whether you follow Agile or Waterfall, this will probably take more of a Agile look. There's a couple key roles throughout that software development cycle. There's the product owner role that Armin already mentioned. The product owner is the role that is responsible for developing the requirements, the features, the product strategy, right? What is the product going to provide back to the users or the business or the customers that is going to help them interact? There's the testing role, which is going to test functionality as it comes across, and the developer role.
You skipped one.
I did. The developer role. I went a little bit out of order.
Okay.
There is another role here that, and as Armin goes through, there would be a compliance role. Sometimes developer and testers they play a hand in the compliance space, but in the life sciences and primarily the pharmaceutical industry where there's GXP software, there's a compliance role that also mandates specific documentation is created, following specific formats, following that SDLC process. So as the product owner writes the requirements, there's a specific format that needs to be followed. As the developer creates the software, there's specific documents that need to be produced, like architecture diagrams and those kind of things. And then as the testers test that process, there's also different documents that need to provide that the software is working appropriately based off the requirements and how it was built. So that's kind of the whole end-to-end process and how it comes together at a high level. There's a lot more nuances inside of there. But I think that can help give a little bit of background as Armin talks through the different kind of automation approaches that he took through Clawbot, which I thought, like I said, when I saw it, was extremely impressive with what it was able to do once you had that architecture, that framework, those learnings embedded into that kind of current state. I can't call it final process. Let's call it the current state process, because I'm sure at how fast AI is moving, it's, 6 months from now, it could look completely different.
I mean, we're improving on things every day too. So, great point, Kenny. In terms of the life cycle, right? So software development life cycle, some companies follow Agile, some companies follow Waterfall. In life sciences specifically, in a lot of cases, a lot of organizations combine those two because they want to develop using Agile methodology, because they want to iterate faster, they want to get features faster in for demos and so forth. But there's also an aspect of being a GXP environment where you have to think about compliance, right? So in most of our clients, what we see is they use combination. So you go through your iterative process while building, and once you cross over the threshold to validation, it becomes a waterfall process where documentation have to be signed and approved prior for you to moving forward, and so forth and so forth and so forth. But at the same time, what that allows organizations to do is continuously improving the product, continuously delivering on features, at the same time keeping their compliance in check, right? So we took that as a kind of a starting point, right? So we took our regular hybrid SDLC process, if you will. And then what we did is we broke down every single process that is done by every single primary owner. You mentioned those owners, from product owner to developer to tester to validation person, and even DevOps down the line, right, for the deployment part. And each one of these primary owners are responsible for a set of tasks that they usually perform within the process itself. Now, then what we did is we took those tasks and we broke them down even further to say, what out of these tasks, let's say a product owner is responsible for 5 different things, right? So they're responsible for coming up with a new feature ideas and talking to business users, right? Can that be replaced by an automation? Probably not. You still need that human interaction and so forth. So we left that alone, right? What about prioritizing a product backlog? Can that be done by automation? Probably not in the beginning, maybe in the future, but in the beginning, we left it alone. So that sits with a human still. And then we came to, well, can we write features in a specific format that we want to, right? In Gherkin format, we want these features once they are thought of, once they are prioritized in a backlog. Now we need to come up with a bunch of user stories. Can an automation do that? Absolutely. So we took that portion and we said, well, everything prior to that is going to be done by a human. Now, this specific portion is going to be done by AI. And once it's done, it needs an approval. Well, that goes back to the human in the loop, right? So the way that we built this is we took all of these different tasks, we broke them down, and we said, which one of these tasks can be automated from the beginning, and then which one of these tasks can continuously be as a human task. And then we went through every single responsible person or responsible owner of the task, and we did the same thing for developers, we did the same thing for testers, we did the same thing for validations. And then by doing
Armin, you also had a couple of situations where, we could automate it, like basically letting it loose to do some ad hoc testing, where you were recommending, well, maybe we shouldn't just take off the leash and let it loose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I was so excited initially about it. I wanted to automate everything. It's like, hey, I'm gonna put A to Z on automation. But then realization comes, right? And like, okay, so this is a real world. Let's do this. Let's, crawl before we walk, before we run, and before we sprint, right? So by looking at the SDLC process as it is, augmenting with AI agents, and then building that mission control, teaching the AI agents what they're supposed to do, where their handoff is, so they can start the task, complete the task, hand it off, wait for the next instruction, and so forth. That's where we are kind of controlling things. And then once we put that all together, we ran it through a true test where we took an actual function of our existing application that hasn't been built yet. It was just a thought. And we took it from that to user story, to building it, to testing it and releasing it. And it's actually working as intended without the agents even initially they had to look at our application and learn it to understand what the application looks like.
So, Armin, that's a really good point. But no, before you go into kind of the end-to-end, what did you have to do to help train so you started to get there, like, did you have to basically containerize your software, bring it on to the VPS, allow the agents to train? Can you talk a little bit about that training process? Because they would have to have a key thing in the agents piece is context, right? And no matter what application you put in Agentic AI frameworks, to me, that context is where things live and die, basically. And if you don't have the right context, whether that's data, semantic layers, all of that, but regardless, you provided them that context. So can you talk a little bit about how you, quote unquote, trained and provided that context to those agents?
Absolutely. So we took an approach with a two-step approach, where the first step, what we did is we simply gave an agent an access to our application from the front end of the application. And I want to make sure that I put this in here. Prompting is very, very, very important. The better your prompting is when working with agents, the better outcome you're going to have. If you're just going to chat to an agent, a single sentence that I want to do something like this, it might interpret it in a way that that's not what you want it to do, right? And it'll go and do whatever it interprets with. So
that often happens with development teams too, by the way.
Absolutely. So prompting becomes very, very important. Writing a good prompt and kind of outlining exactly what you want to do, but also very important, outlining what you don't want to do. That's how you set up the guardrails. And every prompt that's I write for any of these agents always start with as you are working as a developer, as a tester, or whoever, right? You tell what the responsibility of that agent is. You always remind it. Secondly, what you say is you do not want to break any existing functionality. You do not want to destroy anything, and this is what you want to do, right? So you set the guardrails. So prompting is very important. So
you also
first
had
thing,
to teach it. You also had to teach it some GXP policies too, as well, right?
correct.
So that it was
So
aware of.
specifically to the validation agent, right? I didn't care about the GXP policies for the developer or the
Right.
tester because they don't need to know that. But validation agent need to go and learn what the CFR 21 Part 11 is, what are the requirements for that, and so forth, right? So it now has it in its knowledge. So anything that it performs, it has that in the back of its memory, right?
So, Armin, how did you do that? So, prompting being a really key part of it. I'll make a note later about some of the
Oh,
prompting
Kenny,
lessons
that's the
learned.
secret sauce, and you're going to have
I've
to
had-
pay for that.
But I didn't want to send us off on a tangent because I'm going to say something later about prompting with some of the implementations that I've done at clients with AI, and prompting being a huge upskilling aspect of anything in the AI space right now. But when we talk about kind of that document piece and understanding and training on CFR, 21 Part 11 and all of that, how did you feed it this information, Armin? What did you do?
So as soon as I spun off, let's just say I'm going to take the validation agent as an example here. So as soon as I spun off a validation agent, I actually gave it a name also. And I said, now you are my validation agent. You are working in the pharma industry. And then I started writing a prompt where I would like for you to go out and learn from the world out there because it has an access to the internet. It has an access, and we're using OpenAI Codex, right? So it has an access to all of this vast information. Go out there, learn everything that you need to know about software development within the pharma space, following CFR 21 Part 11 guidelines and so forth. And it came back and said, okay, I am now, it took a little bit. It took about a good 2 hours for it to go and fetch the information and do everything and so forth. And it came back. It came back with some of the stuff that it learned. And then I had to additionally prompt it to go and learn specifically for this, right? Specifically for non-functional requirements. I want you to always keep that in mind when you are going after it, right? So it was multiple different prompts that had to go into it. But literally what I said is to go out there in the world and learn this and come back to me and tell me when you're ready.
See, and
Let me ask
that
both of
is
you.
what's...
Sorry, go ahead, Kenny.
I was just say that's what's crazy to me too, Armin, is you can just kind of unleash this and say, go learn and come back and I'll review it and tell you how well you did. Whereas I would have guessed before you said that you were feeding it documents, your own documents, which you can if you have organizational specific documents. But, in this case, it just kind of went out autonomously and figured out how can I start taking this information, look for the right information, and then use that. That's super powerful. It's crazy.
That is insanely powerful.
Yeah.
Insanely powerful. And anytime that the agent is stuck and it comes back and says, well, I don't know, I can't do this, or I don't know how to do this, you can always tell it to go learn it and come back when you do.
So I wanted to ask you guys something. So I think this will also make us far more efficient. It'll take a little while because I think there's a lot of human intervention that could make it not be adopted so quickly. So when we did our roundtable over at the Advanced Therapies Week, we heard from hospitals in particular who were kind of struggling with a lot of the, let's say, regulatory requirements that get pushed down on them. And 2 or 3 of these guys said, look, we also have to follow FDA requirements, and you guys, sponsors in particular, they were talking about actually overinterpret these guidelines, right? I'm wondering if these agents will, at some point, at least you'll be able to interact with them and say, this is a more efficient way of doing it. You don't actually need to, do 1 through 10. If you do 1 through 6, you're going to actually still be compliant, still be okay, because there is, in that supply chain, when you go, especially in, let's say, a CAR T world, there's definitely frustration on each of these, points as you go along there. And I'm wondering if these agents are going to, at some point, help. If people are willing to listen, or people are willing to kind of open their minds to that.
Personally, I think agents are going to touch every aspect of life in the next 5 years, right? You can't escape it, I think, at this point because of how powerful they are. I think it's going to come down to how fast regulatory bodies are willing to adopt that, but I already know they are using agents. So I was talking with one of my clients. The FDA has come on record and said they have this ELSA agent, and they're using it to help automate. Right now, what I'm seeing is more back office oriented functions, which I think makes the most sense. Those are the functions that are most ripe for automation. But I think that I don't see why not, Anthony. I think those kind of functions and processes are ripe for automation, right? Where they're very reproducible. There's already a lot of data available for them, and it can stop being up for interpretation. You can kind of just interact with these agents. They can learn through that persistent memory, can learn how are other organizations doing it. Maybe this is a more effective way. I think you can start to also see a better standardization across the industry on some of these things as you interact with those because of that persistent nature. And I think there'll probably be a lot of agents that are doing that behind the scenes. You may not know like how many are there. They all might look the same, feel the same. You might talk to them very similarly. But that's kind of how I see it in the industry. I think that regulatory bodies are aware and they are embracing and kind of on a risk-based approach, picking and choosing what areas to experiment with. And I see that really taking off. Like, everyone is trying to do more with less. I think one of the things that the AI leaders are talking about now is at some point in the near future, there will be $1 billion company with one employee, which is a crazy thought to think about. One employee, and it's all agent powered. So that's where it's going.
So the comments that we heard weren't so much, regulatory needs to, be okay with AI. This was more around we're doing more than regulatory requires. And my question is kind of like, will the AI bots help humans say, okay, maybe I am over complicating what's going on here?
So to your point also, regulatory bodies continuously change their approach and regulations. They add things, they remove things, right? So, and all of that change, unless a human that is in the loop constantly educates themselves and constantly looking for those changes, they will not know. Well, the agent on the other end can be programmed that almost on a daily basis, that it can go and actually see, what did FDA change today? Did FDA made any changes to their regulation? And if there are any changes to specific
regulations.
Thank you. To specific regulations, then they can automatically take that and then incorporate into their next round and so forth. So that continuous learning autonomously is a great thing that is waiting for us in the future, I believe. Because
and Armin, to build upon that, I could see a world, Anthony, where there's an FDA bot, right, and says, hey, let me ask it questions, and actually let me maybe feed it our thinking on, are we going to meet the requirements? And actually let me feed it all our documents right now, or at least a starting point. There's no reason once we get to a point to where that would come back and say, well, you're missing this, this, and this, and also have you considered this? And when things get smart enough, it'll be able to just, to your point, be able to simplify that and say, this is what you need, almost like a validation agent, right? That is that will guide you through the process. It's a crazy world to imagine where auditors are more kind of on the loop than actually doing the true auditing. But I don't think we're that far away from that, and giving guidance like you're talking about. Hey, you're over engineering this process. Plug in your information. We'll tell you where you can cut things out at, because we know the process now. Because
makes sense.
Yeah. So I'll bring us back in. Okay, so we were in a little bit. It was a great conversation, and honestly, we could probably spend 10 hours talking about all of this. But to kind of bring back into the agentic Clawbot framework that Armin was talking through is, there's the product owner, the developer, the tester, and the validation piece that is kind of with the tester side of things. You were training it, the validation on the internet. It was coming back and learning what is out there, being able to understand what kind of compliance documentation needs to be there based off of an autonomous internet scrape, basically, and kind of pulling that, summarizing it, building it with you, helping guide it through the internet as needed through your prompting. So now we have the setup. I think one thing, Armin, that you didn't maybe talk about is in order for, so the product owner can now, autonomously write features and user stories because it was trained on your documentation and the way that you want it to write, which is the Gherkin format. I've experimented with that in ChatGPT alone, saying, hey, here's some features. Can you write me 10 user stories based off of this? And it's done it. So I kind of see this as the next better approach where this kind of becomes more autonomous. The one piece that we didn't talk about here is, and to go through the whole SDLC process, is the developer side. So how did you bring the developer agent, or let's say the developers agents, I don't know how many you had, into understanding, how it could basically add code, write code, deploy code as that DevOps role into this process?
Yep. So similarly, so once the dev agent was created, I have done two things. First, I gave it our application front end and access to it. And I asked it to go and log in and from the front end, learn the navigation of the application. So it went through and scraped the entire application for every click, where it goes, the flows and everything else. That took entirely probably about 5 minutes to do. And he came back and said, okay, now I mapped the site. I have the mapping of the site. It actually gave a document output of the entire site mapping for all the menus, what menus go where, what screen flows are in, what are the clicks, so where to click and save and so forth. So it knows the front end as well as it knows the CSS output where the look and feel should be, right? So the UX UI. It's very important because now it knows that if I build something next, I'm going to use these type of buttons, these type of colors and so forth. So now it has it in its own memory. That's just from a front end scrape. And then the second thing what I did is I took our GitHub repository and I pulled the GitHub repository. I gave an access to our GitHub and say, clone it locally on the server, look at the repository, and from the repository, understand what type of a stack are we using. What are we using for front end? What are we using for database? What are we using for APIs? And so forth. So one was the front end learning to understand look and feel, what it looks like and what the flows are. Second is the back end learning, meaning like understanding the infrastructure, the structure of the application and what it is. Once it had both of those and put them together, it was ready to go.
So then what did you do? So can you talk through kind of the initial, let's test out this workflow. Let's see end to end. Where did you start? What did you see in that process, Armin? How did you do it?
So training first, right? So every single agent in the loop was trained on what they were supposed to do. We touched on the product owner, we touched on developer, we touched on validation. We also trained the tester as well, right? So same information that we gave to a developer, we gave to a tester agent, because the tester agent needed to know the application from a front-end perspective and the back-end perspective, right? In order to effectively test what the developer is doing. And then we kind of stitched it together and we said, what are we giving for each of these agents, right? So where is your start and where is your end, right? So and then that was done through prompting, and then we pushed it down.
Were you prompting the agent or were you prompting the supervisory agent that's looking across these agents?
So the supervisor, so you're absolutely correct there. So the supervisory agent got a prompt to say, and once we figured out where we're replacing humans in the process with the AI agent, we build out the SDLC process, actually line by line, what's done by human, what's done by agent. Then we fed that into the supervisory agent and we said, train every single agent in the loop on this SDLC process. So it knows where does the AI take place and where's the human takes place, right? So now then it came back and said, now all the agents now are working under assumption of this SDLC process, going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and so forth. Now, once that was done, go ahead.
And Armin, I was going to ask, did you also add in checks, like human checks, as part of that process too? So you were feeding
Yes.
the supervisory agent not only the process, but saying, "Hey, when you get here, if I understand right, you said
Stop.
wait for my command, so
Correct.
that I can have checks throughout this, so I trust what's being outputted before it goes off the rails. If it goes wrong at the beginning and starts taking, that's where the hallucinations and things go wrong. It can really create craziness on the out, like an exponential craziness. So
Yes.
is that kind of how you were doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. So what happened was once we defined our SDLC process, we put in the decision markers or decision point markers. And wherever the flag was set to yes on a decision point, that means that the agent has to stop and not move, right? So the decision marker always sits with a human, right? As an example, so I can give you an example. Let's say a product owner writes a story. A product owner agent writes a story. Well, the next step is review of the story. So once the product owner writes a story, it stops. It does not proceed to hand it over to development until the human reviews the story and says, thumbs up, good, you're good to go. Then it hands it over. Right.
So this is actually the interesting part, right? Because this is also where our CTO is a little bit. So the development piece, I think, is the one that has the most human control in it, because if you want to call it, it's actually an AI or an Agile AI augmented SDLC that we're using. So as you said, right, you got the story gets approved. It goes to the developer, but there's actually a lot of, at least our CTO wants a lot of human kind of oversight in the development, because that user story, or you could call it a requirement, changes as they're building it. Right? Because and actually this allows us to do more iteration, where they build it and they do it really pretty quick. We can look at it, this we don't like it this way, we don't like it that way. Can you fix it? It does the iteration. And when it's done, it can actually then lock the requirement that is used for validation. So it's kind of cool the way that we can actually do that so quickly, but there is a fair amount of human interaction in that development layer, because that's where they want a lot of control.
Yep. So once that was completed, and what we did is we took a one single feature that we haven't built, that was part of our product roadmap, that we haven't built into an application. And it was actually an enhancement to an existing feature, which was very interesting for us to see how the agent is going to actually go and develop it, because part of the feature already exists. It's just an enhancement to a current feature, what it's already existing. And we literally took that user story through prompting, created a prompt, and fed it through the process, and then the total output time between feeding this from the product owner through the developer through tester. We didn't do validation in this run because we didn't run it all the way through with validated documentation, because once again, this is a POC. This is the first time we wanted to see it. It took 3 hours and 25 minutes of work for the agents to take this story and deliver a final version of the feature.
So, and for what that means, right, is it built it, it deployed it, and it tested it, right? So
Correct.
it did all of that.
Correct.
Throughout your SDLC process.
Correct. And it gave back saying, here's the link where you can access this deployed application on your local server. We didn't deploy it out to the environment, right? And that was a direct instruction too. When you finish it, build this out locally, because I want to see it first before you push it to Git, right? So it built it, gave out the output. Here's the URL. You can log in. We logged in with an existing user account and looked at the feature, and the feature was complete. I was waiting for it to not work, break, giving a lot of errors and everything else. And to my surprise, it was working. And
well, the
interestingly
cool thing
enough,
was it found bugs, right? It
yeah,
found
yeah,
its
yeah.
own bugs and fixed them, which was kind of cool.
Interestingly enough, throughout the entire process, as it was testing it, it found defects. It went back, it fixed those defects, came back, retested clean, and only then gave me the final product.
And it did a little bit of regression too, right? To make sure it didn't break anything that was already working.
Correct. And actually, interesting part, during regression on our current application, it found 3 minor defects that were not found before by human testers. And it actually came back and said, hey, by the way, this is something extra, but you have here, here, and here. These are minor issues. You might want to take a look at them. And I took those issues and went back to our CTO. And what he said is, well, yes, 2 of them are already on our roadmap to fix. So the agent did that without me even asking for it.
And it had the test report afterwards to say, look, this is the test scripts, this passed.
Yes.
One question.
So wait a second. Well, that's very cool. That can also be very dangerous, right? Because it did it without asking.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I technically asked to go and regress the application.
Okay.
So I didn't ask specifically to go look at this screen or that screen, but I said once you build it as part of the prompt, once you finish building the feature, make sure you regress the application to see if you broke anything else within the application, right? So he came back and said everything's working fine, nothing has been touched or broken, but here are the little things that you might want to take a look at.
And I think, but you raise a really good point, Anthony, is that's where those controls are super critical. And at least in my experience with, using things in AI, helping clients, sometimes it does things that you've never even, you wouldn't even think it's a possibility. So it's like, how can I think about all these crazy edge cases that AI might go off and just do because it somehow gets this inkling to go do it and you don't even know why. And I think that's probably where some of that concern is in the industry, is how do you control this thing as well as possible? I think that's where that blast radius control is. I think the thinking is you're not going to be able to control an infinite number of edge case possibilities that AI is going to be coming with. So that's where you try to put in those kind of controls and different safeguards as you go through it. It's a really, really good point, Anthony. I was going to ask a question and I don't know, Armin or Anthony, one of the other things I've heard a lot about, there's a big thing around vibe coding now where people are prompt coding. I've actually seen pretty good applications be demoed to me that were built on vibe coding. But one of the big, let's say, pushbacks I've heard in the industry is, you can vibe code these things, but they're never really production ready. You need to have a smart developer that can understand and make sure you're not creating code just for the sake of code, and that it's not basically, it looks good, but it's slop. So I guess, did your CTO give any input in the code that was being created and anything around? I know the more complex things get, probably the more challenging it is. But any feedback on kind of the code quality, if you want to call it that, coming back from your CTO on any of the pull requests that he would have reviewed as part of this process?
So initial review of the code of that small feature enhancement that we have done came back clean, meaning like he didn't come back saying that, hey, it created all these different hooks and so forth and unnecessary code or anything else. So it came back clean. Now, we haven't done a really deep dive on the actual code reviews because this was quick POC for us, and we are not actually doing this in our real production environment, if you will, right? We're still playing with it. But I would hope that this guardrail that stays in place for code review will be there for a very long time, and it will be reviewed by either our CTO or any of the high-level developers that we have.
It should be, right? Because we do code reviews even when our development team builds something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just that's standard quality control. So I don't
absolutely.
know, at least right away, that we'll move away from that. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I don't think we would move away for a very long time from that, because that's part of the guardrails that we do want to keep in control. We don't want to give away that responsibility to an agent as of right now. But initial pass, it was kind of clean. It wasn't too bad. But
And
I
I could
think
definitely
it also,
see. Go ahead, Armin.
sorry, but I think it also had to do that it wasn't building something from scratch. It was
The
actually
complexity
going.
that is there
It's
as part of the task that you gave it. Yeah.
Well, not just that, but
But
it actually looked through our GitHub repository and it looked at all the files and it actually enhanced the existing. It wasn't building anything new. It would take the files that were already there and say, well, you already have for example, this was a comment feature. You already have a comment feature. This is where it lives. I'm going to edit the code and add these particular lines to allow it to do X, Y, Z. So it was working off of something existing. It wasn't building something brand
Yeah.
new. Now, I
but
wonder how it's going to do with brand new
but
stuff. Go.
but you did build something completely brand new.
Oh, yes, I did.
He did.
Yes, I did.
I
So
don't know if you want to talk about that or not, Kenny, but he did build
I was
an
gonna ask
internal.
one other or make one other
Yeah.
note too, just as we talk about this. I could see immediate value though in using AI to help with the documentation process, right? We talked about kind of that back office where there's a lot of automation things that get created that are ripe for automation. And to me, I know we're talking about code because that's kind of like let's call it right now part of the holy grail of what we're trying to get to in building this. But I could see immediate value in being able to quickly create documentation off of this, still with human review, but currently in implementations that I've done, it can take days to weeks of someone's time to build out, make sure documents are updated and all of that. And I could see in this process an immediate kind of ROI value back of, okay, well, I no longer need to have a compliance person full time scraping all of this. We can start with, boom, that document's ready to go. Now just review it and instead of starting from scratch, basically. And I could see that as an immediate value driver here.
Definitely.
Well,
So,
you know what? Actually, before you, so there's what you're talking about, Kenny, but we're also running a second POC at a very large client where we're using AI to, let's say there's a change request that comes in, since you're talking about documentation. So those change requests flow down into, because it's all GXP, right? Where do your SOPs need to be updated? Where do your other documentation? So what we're doing is we're running an experiment with AI to take a look at, okay, you make this change request, these documents need to be updated. Not only these documents, this section, this paragraph, and in fact, this line needs to be updated to be compliant. So we do see, and I think Armin, you're participating a little bit in that one as well.
yep,
But to make that more efficient and to more effective.
absolutely. So, yes, to your point, Kenny, documentation changes or working with documents, it's very it's a low-hanging fruit because it's literally going after something that is already there. It's not mission critical. So in terms of if something is broken, it still has a review component where the humans are in the loop for reviews and so forth, but it's not going to bring down the entire system if something is not working, which is very, very important. Now, what other thing that we did right away, what I saw a need is we are using 3 different spreadsheets to control the budget and do the visibility for invoicing and everything else.
So just for context, Kenny, he's switching to an internal application, an internal process that we were using to manage.
Effectively a back office process that we were talking about, right?
Exactly.
Around invoicing, financial management, all those kind of things.
Because that could be a pain. Oh my God, where's this? And our team that handles that, where is this invoice? How is this working? And so anyway, just for context, go ahead.
What I did is I took those spreadsheets and combined them all together and created an application, internal application that does budgeting, invoice tracking, connection to our bank account and the application that we we use for bookkeeping.
Hang on, let's
and so
be
forth.
clear. The agents don't have any access to our bank accounts whatsoever. None
It's
whatsoever.
connections. So it's humans in place. What we did is we build an application via agents. Agents do not run it. Humans still run it. Humans still process invoices, still pay and everything else. But we use agents to build an application and remove the need to carry 3 different spreadsheets going into one space where you can automatically see and run reports and do all kinds of different things. And the entire thing took about 2 weeks to build from scratch. And it's completely brand new.
Which is why this, if you've read in the markets, a lot of the financial markets are really, software as a service is really being impacted here, because they expect, the analysts and the market makers expect that AI is going to start replacing software as a service, where you can just, in a week or two, I'm not going to start paying my software subscriptions. I'm just going to go build my own software that works for my processes. I can do this through autonomous agents very easily through prompt engineering once I have my infrastructure set up. So why should I pay a monthly fee for this? Now, the infrastructure, the models, those kind of things would still need to be there to support it, like the cloud infrastructure that you're using to run your VPS. But the application layer and that layer is kind of, that's why all the markets have been reacting in the last couple of months when this got released, because that's where people are thinking this is going to kind of really change.
I think
yeah.
I hear what you're saying. I think yes and no. I think so. For us, we were running this spreadsheet, right? And we don't want to invest, let's say, in a big ERP system or whatever that maybe could help, maybe couldn't. And this was pretty. Yeah, I mean, it fits exactly the process that we use, right? And it's very low hanging fruit, very inexpensive. But at the end of the day, I think it's no different than today, right? So you used to have pharma companies that had really big IT shops. Oh, let's build it ourselves. Oh, there's nothing out there, we should do it. So then you lose standardization, you lose efficiency. So yes, maybe in some cases you're still, in certain instances, yeah, you're going to lose those SaaS applications because we don't need to go out and do that. But we're still hosting that. It's still running on AWS servers. It's not like it's free either, right? There's still cost associated to it, but other
totally
softwares, yeah, other software, do you really want to be a software shop, even if you got AI agents that can do everything? I don't know.
And there is, I work with a CIO at one of my clients, and if I put on his hat, he would also say this is also a huge problem right now because of how easy things are, not only from a security side, but the amount of someone at a big organization can go use Replit or something like that to go build a very good looking app in an hour or two and say, this meets my need. I want to go and deploy this into production, and now I want to use this for processing. You're like, whoa, hold up. That's the antithesis of everything we're trying to do for global standardization and trying to get data into one spot, because data is kind of the new oil, right? And kind of what's being used in the industry. So I fully agree with your point too, Anthony, right? And I do think that there was an overreaction in the markets, but anyway, that I'm not a financial analyst. But
so
that's
this
kind
goes
of
back
where some
to
of the thinking and back and forth is going of, like, how is software as a service going to be impacted? What ends up winning out in the long term? And what does that look like? I don't think anyone knows yet, because there is still going to be a place for it, right?
Excuse me. So this kind of ties back to how we started, right? Yeah, anybody can do it, right? Well, that's like, anybody can play tennis, but not everybody's going to be like, the best or a pro or what have you, right? So
well-spoken, coming back from a tennis tournament.
Yeah,
Anthony.
I'm actually in Indian Wells, went to the tennis tournament, so it's kind of in my mind. But I mean, it goes back to, you can't just, I could do it, right? But nobody's going to let my app that I built go into production. That's where you need the Armins, our CTO, the other folks. And to be honest, this is why we're doing this. When you say the SaaS applications may be in trouble, yeah, so they are. But which ones have more value? Which ones are things that you shouldn't just all of a sudden go out and build your own thing? So let's say you're a biotech, right? Oh, I could build a little piece of software to do something in my process, maybe managing batches or what have you. But should you really be doing that? Should you be focused on the efficacy of your therapy and let somebody else, even if they're using AI agents and it's easy to do? I think there's still a market, but there'll be some clean out maybe.
I think that's where the democratization piece comes too full board. I've seen clients, we talk about in analytics, data democratization was a big thing, I would say. It still kind of is, but I'd say it's kind of on the down because people also saw the downsides, right?
But nobody wants to share their data, so you don't have a big
I've worked
pool.
with clients that have, a manufacturing site has 1,000 dashboards now built because it's democratized. So now anyone can go build a dashboard. But because of that, what's the source of truth? If I want to look at my number of deviations or my number of kappas, if this person on the site leadership team has a dashboard and this person has a dashboard and this person has a dashboard, what's the source of truth? So I think that's that double-edged sword of this ease of use, democratization, availability, and enterprise corporate governance system of records. And you're kind of seeing it play out here with these open source tools that are just, getting open. I think that's where leadership needs to provide the right governance and guardrails over it. Sorry, I know you were trying to say something.
We're kind of at time, so I was going to say thank you both for this episode. Armin, do you have any last thoughts that you want to throw in there before I sign us off?
Yes, for anyone who's listening, do not take the leash off of this thing yet. Make sure you have proper guardrails in place, play by the rules, make sure you limit access, and then take one step at a time. But I do think that in the future, this is the future. And from the perspective of the enterprise level applications, which you guys were just talking about, I just wanted to add one thing. I think mission critical enterprise level applications will not go away, but something that can help in the process to make things faster internally for companies, that could be definitely built internally and replaced and stuff like that. But the enterprise level mission critical applications will still stay the way they are. I don't think they're going to go away.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. And here's my last thought is that it also depends on the size of your organization, right? Some large multinational can't afford to just, have anybody and everybody play. We are in an advantage because we can control it. There's a few of us, we want it that way, and it makes it easier. All right, guys. Kenny, Armin, thanks again. It's been great conversation. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
and
Anthony.
This is another episode. Yeah. All right, guys. Sorry I cut you off. So another episode of CGT Square Talk. Kenny, Armin, we'll see you again soon. All right, guys.
Bye.
Subscribe for more insights from leading CGT experts.